Hello and welcome to Hello Governor, the podcast. As always, I am Abdullah, and my guest today is introduce yourself, good sir.
Hey, I'm Bill Mundy.
Is that how you
Uh,
pronounce your last name, Mundy or Monday? I was confused. It's like, was
no,
it Monday or Monday?
oh my gosh, that's been the bane of my existence. It's Mundy. My grandfather was an orphan and came over from somewhere and wound up on Ellis Island. And I think someone made the name up, and I think the guy spelled it wrong, but it's Mondy. So I always say Mundy, like the day without the A.
Please don't tell me you were born on a Monday, because then that would make it really weird.
Oh, now you're flashing me back because that kind of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday started when I was in second grade, and I walked into school. The janitor's name was Mr. Pickle, and he said to me, "Look, it's Bill Mundy on Tuesday." And of course, that got a big laugh from everyone. That followed me, but I always thought Mr. Pickle had the nerve to make fun of my last name.
Yeah, I may be named after a pickle, but you know what? At least I'm not named after a day of the week. Look at this
Yeah.
loser.
I know. Not sure that like having the name Mr. Pickle around a bunch of young kids was a good idea for whoever hired that, but we don't need to go there.
I mean, at least it's much more memorable than Mr. Smith, because
It
I've
is,
I've known a lot of Mr. Smiths in my time, and I'm just like, that
and
is a
not a lot of
sad last
pickles.
name. That is a sad
Yeah,
last name.
that's right. I guess rather be a pickle than a Smith. But anyway, yes, it is Bill Mundy, not Monday. And of course, many things over the years have misspelled my name as Bill Monday. Um, I think there is like a Baptist minister in the South, by the way, whose name is Billy Mundy, and for a long time I was getting emails for him, and we look very different, so I thought that was curious. But at least I always have a B profession.
So, how did the whole acting thing start? Was acting something you wanted to
Huh.
get into, or was it just something that, as you got older, you realized, hey, I want to do this for a living?
Well, a lot of people ask that, and it is a weird story, but this is truthful. My first day, so the school bus, weirdly enough, on first grade stopped in front of our house, which was sort of nutty. But anyway, Joe Labansky, my good friend, and Linda Howell, my next door neighbor, first girl I kissed, she was we all went on the bus together, and we came off at when school ended. My mom greeted us, and she said, "What did you do today?" And I said, "Well, we all had to say what we wanted to be when we grew up." She said, "Oh, really? Well, what did you say?" And Joe said, "I want to be a forest ranger." And Linda Howell said, "I want to make toys." And I said, "I wanted to be an actor." And Joe did become a forest ranger. Linda worked for Hasbro and designed toys. And, you know, do the math on that. This knucklehead wound up doing the schmacting thing. So, in answer to your question, I guess I always knew. Maybe I was born that way. I think more to the point, I sort of had no marketable skills. But
Okay, the fact that you went to school with someone who ended up working at Hasbro designing toys is really funny, considering that you
yep,
would be a part of a Transformers series.
right? I know, I know. I think she made, fun things that didn't hurt people, and I yelled.
So,
But yeah, what happened from there is probably what you want to say. Without boring anyone, if anyone's actually still listening, the I was I sort of grew up in high school, and I was a skinny kid with sort of a deep voice, and sort of survive, I could kind of make people laugh. And th- I I wasn't smart enough to get a scholarship, and I wasn't I could barely throw a baseball, so that didn't really come into mix for a scholarship to go to school. So I was going to join ROTC, and that was a military thing. So I got my hair cut, I was all set to go, and if you joined for 2 years, they would pay for your college education. Well, I got a I got an inv I got this invite from my guidance counselor to do this audition for this kind of major scholarship thing that was associated with the same people who put out the SAT scores. If I don't know here if they do that there, but here you have to take these tests, and then if you do okay, you get into college. Well, that same place, for only 2 years it existed, they were doing an artist search, like for fine artists and for actors. And so I auditioned, and of course, Bill Mondy and the law of averages. I wound up like third, which you sort of think, well, and I think there were a number of thirds, but I sort of was like, well, no, it wasn't first, it wasn't even second, it was like third. So I, shoved it in my drawer and was like, oh well. Well, it turned out a bunch of schools started to offer me scholarships for acting, and the best one was the University of Illinois, and I got a full scholarship. So I went there. I was very lucky. There was a great acting teacher there at the time, and I finished that. So there I was in the middle of the Midwest, and I was like, now what the hell do I do? I mean, I don't know New York. It seems like everything's happening in New York City or LA, but how do you even start that? I have no idea. A friend of mine who was a bit older than I was, and we had done an acting company together, when I was like 18. He said, you got to audition for this really cool school, Yale. And I was like, oh, okay. He goes, yeah, once you do that, you got a ticket to everywhere. And so Yale and New York University both auditioned at the same place in Chicago. So I drove up from the middle of Illinois to Chicago with some friends, and I was all set to do my Yale audition, and I was so terrified, so nervous. So I remember the door opened, and it seemed like the longest room I've ever seen in my life. Like it suddenly became a football field, and this little desk with this little man was way in the so I thought, I have to get from the door to there. And suddenly I started to walk toward it, and everything, I was conscious of everything, was conscious of how my leg moved, my hands moved, and I stuck my hand out to shake his hand way too soon. So that meant I had to walk the entire room with my hand stuck out. So by the time I got to him to shake his hand, I was sort of done. I stumbled through those auditions, and I left so dejected. And I did have an NYU audition, but for some reason, all my nerves had ended because I was shot from having what I did. So I had no anxiety whatsoever and thought my life was ruined. So I went in and did the NYU audition, and I just was very free. I was able to do sort of what I could do. Well, kind of to cut to the end of this story, I was put on Yale's wait list for that year. They only took 16, and they had two waiting people on the waiting list. I was one of them. And then NYU called, and they said, we'd like to offer you a full scholarship. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I got lifted out of the mire by I guess my ability as a kid to make people giggle, and then there we go. So yeah, that's how it all began. So I wound up in New York City at the age of 21, and that was a 3-year acting program. They only took they only took 16 out of about 1,000 every year for that graduate program. Marcia Gay Harden, you might be familiar with her. She's a classmate of mine. Won an Oscar, and yeah, it's lots of number of talented people. Peter Krause was just below me, and yeah, tons, tons of talented people that I had the good fortune of dancing with. Then that's how it all happened.
Amazing. Like it's just it's one of those things where it's basically just fake it till you make it, basically.
Yeah, I think I'm still doing that, you know.
It's like if you can make the right person laugh, the doors will open up for you, basically, is what I'm getting from that story.
Yeah, that's true. And it was also survival, right? I was a skinny, awkward kid, so in order to just not get the crap beaten out of me, that was a good way to dodge. Of course, my brother, who was about 9 years older than me, had this legacy of being this amazing sports star. So everyone expected sort of maybe me to walk. Luckily, 9 years is a long time, but people still sort of remembered him. He's the kind of guy that could never, have never have played anything, never have played something and then wound up on the field and been the star player that afternoon. Like anything that involved a ball or coordination or fast movement or like even psychological being a warfare, that an athlete has. He had all that. And I missed every single one of those genes. So way it all works out, I guess.
Hey man, I mean you've had a very I would say a very interesting acting career, and not a lot of
Yep.
people can say, hey, I voiced a Transformer, or I voiced like
Yep.
a super villain or whatever. Just all the how many people can say that they've been a part of Transformers and Gundam, the OG Gundam, not this new Gundam, the OG Gundam.
Yeah, I think and that might have been one of my first voiceover jobs. So I was primarily an on-camera actor. Well, I mean, to go back from that, I was trained as a stage actor, right? So after NYU, was what I did. I did stage. I was lucky I did a revival of a really good off-Broadway play. There's a fancy playwright called Lanford Wilson who's written a ton, and I was able to do a revival of that, and I had kind of a smaller part, and this is one of those real stories where the guy who had kind of the romantic lead that the night before broke his leg. Not the night before, like 3 days before. And I was never even his understudy. And I had to I stepped up into that part. And, I think I was pretty bad at the beginning, but I kind of warmed into it. And, but yeah, anyway, so I was a stage actor. And then I did a lot of regional theaters. Here in the States, at least at that time, there were a lot of regional theaters, which every large city in the States would have this theater where it would produce its own plays, and typically the leads were from New York or LA, and then smaller roles were typically filled by local actors. And so I did that for many many years, till my agent in New York said, "I'm going to LA. You want to come?" And I said, "Well, okay." So I did that, and that was a weird transition from stage to film and television, not the least of which was the audition process. When you audition for a play, there's a little stage typically, and there's, you know, 30 feet, and then there's whoever you're auditioning for, at least 20 feet, and you're doing your thing. Well, when you start to do film and TV auditions, it's it's smaller than like a New York living room. So it's a tiny little thing. The producers are on a couch. You're reading with the casting person. There was a camera right in your puss, and it may the weird thing about film and TV acting uh, is that it feels like it's the most intimate of performances, because it's just your face, or looks very intimate, but always not to wreck anyone's magic or that people don't know, but it's more like being on a construction site. There's tons of people around you, and it often you're talking not even to the person, you're kind of talking to a lens or next to say, yeah, yeah, yep, you can't, can you just don't look at her, just look a little to the right of her. And it's a very weird thing, right? Because it looks like you're being super close or intimate or whatever, but it's the most intimate way of acting is actually on stage, which seems the most phony baloney in a way, right? Um, but it isn't. So in doing the film and TV stuff, I guess I need to sort of say this other little bit. When when you're a young actor in LA, as I was in the early '90s, you do whatever you can to make money. So because you're not acting all the time, nobody is, and unlike a lot of people, I didn't have a trust fund. Seemed like everybody had a trust fund back then, which was like, I don't have to work and I've got a pile of money in the bank. And we came from very, very modest means, so we did not have a trust fund. I used to call LA the rest home for the young because I thought, why am I the only one with three jobs? So I would, I had a bunch of jobs like waiting tables. I actually, I did some landscape digging. I was the worst landscape person that was around. I apologize for anyone whose home existed back then that I wrecked. And I, uh, I was waiting tables, doing jobs, and auditioning when I could. Because, and also back then, if you got one job on film or TV, it could last you a while, because it was like you made some money. There was only still primarily the three networks, right? So you could make some money by just doing a couple of guest spots. There was guys that made livings doing like three spots a year, and the rest of the time, those guys literally were on the beach. They were always a bit older than I was, but I was starting to get into that time where more channels were coming, uh, budgets were decreasing because it didn't make sense for places to put a ton of money into one thing. They'd rather put less money into more things. So that was starting to happen. So while I was waiting tables, this one of the girls was like, "Hey, I kind of do these every once in a while. I do these AM radio ads, and they're for medical stuff." And the guy got sick, and the producer called me and said they needed somebody else. You kind of have a good voice or something. You wanna? I have to do it. It just needs me now. I was like, okay. So I went, and I kind of had a knack for it. Um, and the guy kind of instantly liked me. And at that time, I got $50 for a spot, which was, like a waiting table shift. It was a ton of money. Now I know it should have been like $350, but I did that for a while, and that was my first intro into, anything voice. And I kind of weirdly had this knack for it of sort of making things a bit, natural sounding. And also, I should say at that time for voiceover, um, we were coming out of this like 70s and 80s even voice in commercials, which was always this male voice, older voice that's either sounded like, your dad or your uncle or your boss that would sort of narrate a spot, and that's why you should get jelly rolls, or Cindy knows Jif is wonderful. It's like, so that man was always directing it. And they were these older guys, and they were the guys who were all into it. And it was starting to get away from that, starting to move like we don't want that so much. So I weirdly fell into this okay place because my voice was sort of deep, right? But next to them, I sounded like Skippy the ice cream guy, like, hey, wait up, guys, hey. And so I wasn't threatening to them, but it was also in the vein of them. So pretty soon I started to do like a lot of guy next door spots. Those, hey, did you ever notice? Hey, have you ever been near this? Where they would say, and that's why Bob knows, so that type of thing. And so that's sort of how my voice thing happened. Um, I got, I was doing jobs in LA, acting on camera, and I had gotten a voice agent as well. But then I got a job that filmed in Canada. It was the Dead Zone. And actually, no, it was called UC Undercover was the thing. And while I was filming, actually, yeah, never aired because 9/11 happened, I believe. And that made them not air the show. But while I was up there, I auditioned for UC Undercover. No, I auditioned for Dead Zone, and I got that, which was just kind of this 2-hour movie, and then that turned into a series. So I kind of had to get my, citizenship stuff together. So, you know, I wound up being there for, got married. I wound up being there for 18 years, and that that was kind of amazing. So that's really how I was doing film and TV up there, and then my agent said, "Hey, have you tried the voice thing down here, up here, I should say?" And I haven't. And I think my first one, I think that was Gundam was my first gig, and it was something I it was, it was akin to dubbing, right? And I had done some of that in LA for other. I was in a thing called a loop group. I oh yes, so I'd done this loop group thing, and there's a lot of them. So when you were watching a TV show or a movie at that time, I don't even know if they have them anymore, but let's say someone was in a crowd, or when you're shooting something like a dance scene and everyone's on the floor, you do know that there's actually no music playing, right? There people are just kind of moving like there's music going. It's silent. So so if the guy and the girl, or the guy and the guy, or the guy whoever's talking to each other are dancing with their moves, they're just actually moving to absolutely no music. It's silent, and they're doing the dialogue like there is. So people in the background are kind of moving their mouths and they're doing stuff. But when they layer all the sound back in, they have people. Somebody's going, oh, so there's two people in there. You see, they're having a conversation, which were two extras who were just going, moving their lips. So you and some other person in this loop group stand up and go, "Hey Jane, how are you? Oh God, that looks great. Oh really? That looks," trying to sort of loosely match their lips, or at least get a conversation going. So that was a whole great money making thing, was doing that loop group thing. So then I actually looped a couple of German movies as well. And so I got used to kind of matching my lips to some enormous German man's lips on screen. So I got kind of used to doing that. So when Gundam happened, it was a newer director, and I'd never done any animation at all, but I'd done a lot of that looping. And so even for the audition, you had to do it looped, as I recall. And, I had kind of this, Canada has a beautiful sound and a beautiful, sometimes a slight accent, not Vancouver so much, but it does, but it's more a sensibility that's different from the US. Um, it's just nicer. I loved it so much. There's a softer edge. So certain kind of like harsher things for some Canadian actors are not quite as natural as it might come, especially like from a guy from upstate New York might have. So I was Slegger Row, and it was a knockoff of the Star Wars guy. Who's that? What's his name?
Harrison Ford.
And yeah, jeez, yeah. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for bringing me back. Harrison Ford. It was a knockoff of a kind of young Harrison Ford, kind of cocky, kind of, well, whatever. So that was kind of, but that was sort of a little bit how I did. Anyway, I mean, my career as an actor was all cops, bad guys, and asshole. Ooh, can I say that? Jerks. So and that's all because of what I think it was a combination of I did a lot of stuff in Canada and like my New Yorkish sensibility when shows were in Canada could translate sort of well for roles like that. Also, I kind of had a long horsey face and deep voice and motion. Someone said this to me once. It's not called motion pictures by accident, right? It's moving pictures. So when you're on screen, you're a picture that moves by. So what's the first impulse of that picture that you conjure up? And particularly that was, the door has opened a bunch since when I was, in the heat of doing things, but it was like that's what I looked like. So I played cops, bad guys, and jerks. So smart asses and mouthy guys was sort of right up my alley. So that's the story of Gundam. And now I'll probably have to lay down like everyone else after that story.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because like listening to you, because whenever I talk to someone who's from the Vancouver period of that era of animation,
Yep, yep,
some of them went on to do work in the States, and when they
yep,
went on to do work in the States, they were told, "Oh, you got to tone down the Canadianisms," and they still
yep.
do nowadays. Whenever they're recording anything there, they're told like,
They do.
tone down the Canadianisms, which is
Yeah.
really really funny. But you're the first actor I've talked to who had the opposite effect, where it's like, okay, I'm working in Canada now. How do I, how do I make this sound more Canadian?
Well, that's very, very true. Luckily I never did, but in Canada I would get sometimes auditions for jobs that said regular Canadian accent or something like that. And I never knew what that was. And I was like, why are you sending that to me? That you can't swing a cat without hitting 30 guys who sound like that. Why would you want a guy who would fake me sounding like that? And there was one episode of Johnny Test that there were two Canadian tourists and the producer Scott Fellows would always make us audition for even these small things. He would never go, no, just have that. Well, at least no, he would make us all audition. So you had to like stand there in front of everyone and audition for the parts. And by the way, this is what you and I were talking off mic a little bit before. These guys are, like the Ian Corletts of the world and Michael Dobson, and I'm gonna leave out a ton of people, and I can go through the list, but they are so good with just doing. You could just tell them like do a funny voice or a different voice, and they were great with just whoop ready. Here's my different voice, and that's not really my thing. So I always had to start from kind of like an actor. I wind up doing different sort of sounding things, although none of my stuff sounds wildly different, I don't think, except maybe Brain Freezer, which like I'd always have to ice my throat after that. But those guys could just step right into a part and just do a funny voice. I always needed a kind of character. So just to get back, these two Canadian voices, I could kind of do an American idea of a Canadian accent. Hey, how you doing, So it was just kind of extreme and not really how people sound, but it's how some Americans think of it. So I was one of the Canadian. I got cast as one of the Canadian tourists. The Canadian guys didn't, except for Ian Corlett, who could just lay on. It sounded like an American doing a Canadian accent. So yeah, it's funny. The Canadian and American sort of accent thing is very, very slight often in Vancouver. It's just a few simple things, like instead of out, they might go out, or instead of again, like we'd say, they'd say again, or yeah, a few very, I mean, I'm exaggerating because I'm crappy at it, but yeah, it helped me, I think. It actually very much helped me. Scott McNeil's another one of those chameleon voices, by the way.
Yeah, speaking of Johnny Test, like how did that whole thing come about? Because like that is like the show that lasted the most out of all the stuff you've
Yep.
worked on. It's almost 20
Yeah.
years old now, which is crazy.
Yes. So, well, funny how that came out. That was kind of, I think that was the first kind of long-standing role that I had. So I was Mr. Black, and Scott McNeil Neil was Mr. White, and we were. Do you know a show called Dragnet? You probably never heard of that, but if
Oh,
you,
I know Dragnet. I mean, it's
okay,
that, yeah. I know of Dragnet, and I know of the remake with Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks. So there you go.
there you go. Well, for all your younger viewers, they can go back into the catacombs and see what that's about. So it was really like this, these two, or they were like kind of like the Men in Black movies, right? They were like the two guys, they're two cops, and like I told you, I was used to playing cops and bad guys and killers and cops gone wrong usually. So I just kind of took that idea of being a cop and I elevated it. Listen, kid, that thing. So they were these we I just did that, and Scott Fellows thought that was really funny. I think he might have had a different idea about it, but he thought it was funny, and I kind of would improv things a little bit. And this is, if you ever you should get Scott well, excuse me, we'll get Scott Fellows, sure, but you should get McNeil on here as Mr. Black. So Mr. White, because what we would do and what I would have to do, I remember going back my initial conversation or when I started saying that the least intimate thing is on camera acting. Well, and that the most intimate kind of acting is when you can talk or when you're actually connecting with people like on stage. Voice acting is sort of a mix between the two in a weird way for some reason. For me, it's very freeing because, you don't, especially when I'm doing commercials or things, but I also love doing animation with somebody, is that, they're right there with you. But for commercials, I always think mostly as a voiceover, as a conversation. So it's just me talking to me. So in a way, I'm just letting my thoughts bubble out and nobody's watching me. So that's kind of okay. So to get back to Mr. Black and to Mr. White, Scott McNeil and I started because we were this duo, right? We were this team. Is every time I talked, they put us next to each other, which is good. I'd always have to hold his shoulder. So literally almost as if I was falling over. But it was weird because I had to look ahead to the microphone and talk in front of the mic. But if I could hold his shoulder, I always felt connected to him. So it became a kind of joke. And in particular, if I was having trouble with something, finding the laugh or finding the vibe of it, I would grab I would always hold his shoulder. And through that, I think Scott McNeil sort of loved that. So he kind of created this thing also where we were, there was this vague thing, like not only were we, partners in crime. We were kind of maybe hinting that we were also partners in life, you know? So it was like, well, yeah, kind of and sort of, only a wink, maybe. We're not saying, watch, probably it'll get canceled by some network now because I said that. But it was in a light-hearted sort of fun way, so that you'll listen back and there's kind of some fun things where we'd have like spats, like we'd have a little spat together. And there's kind of this thing where it's he started to go talk about Fiji, like trips to Fiji or something. And Scott and I completely made this joke up. I on the side went, Fiji. And Scott went, ooh, Fiji. And then I went, we are going. He went, to Fiji. And we started to just do a little dance going, oh, we are going to Fiji. Hey, we are going to Fiji. So it appears in a number of, it made Scott Fellows really laugh. And it appears in a number of different episodes, and we tried to squeeze it in whenever we could. Whenever it got giddy or anything, we would sing, we are going to Fiji.
No, it's funny you mentioned the whole life partners thing because like
Yeah.
looking at the show now, a lot of people, a lot of people in the LGBTQ community
Yes.
do see them as a gay couple, and
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one who noticed it. I'm glad it was kind of
No,
in the show.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it was at a time when it wasn't the great thing about Canada and Vancouver is it was always, 10 steps ahead of the US in terms of you know, social awareness and openness in a sense. So I think that could happen because of that. Although if you look at some old cartoons, I think that was sort of there sometimes with Bugs Bunny and so, but it was more mocked. This wasn't mocked about it, but it was kind of a light touch. And it was also just kind of nice to see these two guys. Well, don't put that there. That was a nice little fun twist, but it didn't mock it. It didn't mock that at all, but I thought it was a great sort of twist to that.
Yeah, and they are basically like if you look up anything about the show, they're basically everybody's favorite two characters because they're the only ones
Are
that.
they?
Yeah, I mean, people love them, because
Oh,
I
great.
mean, there is like one line that became an internet meme where Johnny,
Please tell me.
I I don't
Yeah,
know if you
not putting you
remember.
on the spot.
I don't know if you remember this scene, but in the episode Runaway Johnny, when he runs into Mr. Black and Mr. White, they're police officers, and Johnny asks, "Why are you police officers?" And Mr. Black replies, "I blew up Malaysia," and that became an internet meme.
Oh, oh, really?
Yep.
I blew up Malaysia.
Says, "I blew up Malaysia," and he just says it in like the most matter of fact way, and it's never followed up
Actual
on, and
way.
it's just like, yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. Well, I have to look up that internet. Well, will you send it to me? I'd
Yeah,
like to see at some
uh,
point. If you
yeah.
find it, it's probably decades old now.
I mean, it's on YouTube and it has like 4 million views. It's like I blew up Malaysia. It's like an 8-second clip and it has like 4 million views, and I'm like, yes.
Oh, poor people, poor Malaysians. They, I hope did they see the humor in it, I hope.
No,
Yeah.
it became a huge internet meme, and everyone that's like one of the few things people remember about the show. Because like there's this weird ironic love for Johnny Test that it's just so
Yep.
funny. I mean, there's just like this weird ironic love for Johnny Test because I've noticed that it went through various periods where originally people hated it because it was on constantly, and then people started to develop this like ironic fandom towards it.
Yes.
Where they were just mocking the whip cracks and all this other stuff, and then years later the Netflix reboot came out, and then everyone liked the show because it's like, hey, the Netflix reboot is really good. Why didn't they make more of it? And it's like, I don't know, because it's Netflix. They don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and there was, some iterations of of the pooch and what was his name? Doogie, Doggy. What was his name?
Dookie.
Dookie, Dookie, right. A couple iterations of Dookie because the original Dookie left the continent for a little bit, and then we were trying to do it remotely. And I can't remember. He was in a I don't know where he was, but he was very far away, and that was before connections were so great, and it just couldn't get it. Lewis, and he was really good too, and it just they couldn't get the connection right, so they had it was just too hard. James Arnold actually was the only one who everyone was from the Canadian cast was there except James Arnold. He would remotely tune in from LA. And James is awesome, you know, and he's one of those guys who can make something seem alive. Just him in front of a microphone, no one else around, and he can do this incredible, wacky thing and just create it all in his head without any trimmings around him. I always needed trimmings, like a hat or the right shoes or to touch somebody or something. I needed something to kind of, ground me. I always marveled at guys who could just jump into a funny voice, and it was the voice that led the character. Lee Tokar is that too. Lee Tokar is amazing. Sometimes they'd say, Lee, can you do like a old general guy? And it's like, okay, old, is he gruff general? Yeah. Did he, what do you think? Like he's been around a little, like 60 or something, something like, how about something like this? And I'm like, I watched it transform in about 2 seconds. And it's one thing to do one line, but then he could sustain a whole character so quickly with that. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting show to look back on because again, as someone who like I said, when I contacted you via email, like I have this
Yep.
weird affinity for that period of animation of the Vancouver cast and on all the shows that you guys worked on, and I'm like, man, this
Did,
because everyone talks about the LA crowd and the
yep.
Texas crowd, but I think like the Vancouver crowd just doesn't get enough love, and that kind of makes me sad. It's like, why? Like because it's really good.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Did Super Noobs ever kind of take off or not so much? You
Not
familiar with that
really. I
show?
mean, Super Noobs was
Right.
one of those things that people just like, people were like really hated it, and it's interesting looking back at that show because if I remember correctly, I think that was the last show. That was like the last Canadian series. Trevor Duvall
Scott Fellow?
Trevor
Oh,
Duvall was a regular on. Like I think that was like the last Canadian series he was a regular on before he moved
oh,
on
is
to
that
do.
right? Yep.
Yeah, I think so. If I'm not mistaken. If I am not
Yeah,
mistaken.
Trevor's another one of those guys, just like absolutely like took off and one of those kind of magical guys who can come up with a ton of voices.
Yeah, I mean, him, David Kay, and Dave Soboloff, like they went over to the U.S. and they became like
Yep.
they became all these huge stars, and yeah, I
Yep.
mean, and I'm happy for him. I mean, I'm happy that Trevor has like found a way to rejuvenate his career as an actor, and I'm kind of glad. I mean, I'm glad that more people know who he is, but
And do not underestimate Ian James Corlett. He is terrific. He's a friend of mine and also one of those magical guys. Did he tell you that he was a he was a ventriloquist when he was a kid?
no, he did not
Yeah.
mention that he was a ventriloquist. That I did not
Well,
know that.
because I remember him, because I call him Curlet. I would say, Curlet, how the hell do you do all those goofy things? What what goes on? What's the thought process? And he said something like, well, as a kid, I was a ventriloquist. And he said, I guess it came from, he kind of came from a particular religious upbringing that was really about not standing in the front of the line. It was about standing in the back of the line. I certainly understand that. It was about blending in. So the way he could kind of get away with saying kind of outrageous things was to actually use a different voice, right? So if a dummy was saying these things that he couldn't say, he could get away with it. So he learned to kind of find different ways to say these different things. So I thought that was really cool. That was really great. And And you know, it's kind of helpful because as I mentioned to you, like I sort of need a character and a story to sort of define the voice a little bit. But I guess if I thought of it like I was, like I had created a little dummy in my mind for each one of these characters, that then there's a little something there. So I had just, it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting thought. Hmm.
And do you watch any of the stuff you've worked on, or can you not stand listening and watching yourself?
Um, is this across the board on camera
Yeah, just in
or
general. Like, do you just like not
yeah?
stand getting? Can you just like, I can't stand looking at myself. Ugh.
Well, yeah, I always like to say, I'm not really my cup of tea. I think I stole that from James Garner. That means, yeah, no, I don't really like to watch or listen to myself. Do well, actually, and not listening better than watching. Um, I, on camera acting, the last probably 15 things I did, actually, I've never seen. And I think once you lose your passion to a little bit to enjoy seeing yourself on screen, um, I think maybe I think that needs to always be there a little bit. I don't know. So so the answer to that is no. Listening to stuff, occasionally I'll look at the some of the animation stuff, but I'm not a big animation follower. That's never really been my thing, and I'm also too busy. I still I've moved. I moved from Vancouver. I started in LA. I and For most of this stuff, and then I was in Vancouver for that chunk of time because I got the series up there, and a series of events led me to stay there. And then when I was going to go back to LA, my soul had sort of moved on from LA because maybe this is to kind of come full circle about the Vancouver guys maybe not getting as much as the uh, LA actors. It's a lot harder road in LA, and the skin that you have to develop um, is a lot thicker in LA. I always describe getting a job like a giant funnel. Everybody jumps in the top of the funnel and one guy bloop pops out of the bottom. And it's often not fun scrambling in that little funnel spot. So I think that leaves, and all of LA can be like that because there's a ton of people, and it's has amazing highs, and it has the saddest lows, and that can play a trip on one's psyche. And Canada has less highs and less lows, and it forces other things to kind of develop, I think, in you. And on the whole, I think I'm a bit of a more gentle soul at heart, which is interesting. And so I couldn't, when we went back to look at places in LA, my soul couldn't catch up with living there again. And the story of how we got to where I am on Kauai is for another day. But I have my own studio here built on Kauai on some acreage, and so we are here, and I am, very lucky and blessed to be recording across the globe from here. And again, that's not really animation stuff so much really for me anymore. My primary stuff still is commercial campaigns and narration when that exists, and there's a lot of acting involved with all of that, but it's kinder and gentler in a sort of way. So
And what was it like going from, like you said, going from three different places in your lifetime? Like, how do you feel each place has affected you as an actor and as a person?
Well, so I would say the three pivotal places of living were New York City, Los Angeles, and Vancouver. And you know, I think it's hard to dissect uh, times without. So it's you can't really dissect cities from where you are mentally, emotionally, uh, age-wise as well. You can't really separate them. So each of them are separate levels of the pie. New York was amazing, and it felt like every day you'd accomplished something. I don't know what Kuwait City's like. I don't know how big it is or whatever, and that's just, American ignorance. Um, I'd love to see it. And New York was always bustling, and just to kind of get from A to B, you feel like you lived a story. So every day, the vibe of that city is like you've accomplished something. You're making it through. Wow, I had a jam-packed day just getting from, you know, 8th Avenue to 42nd Street. It's a whole thing. And by the way, I used to say you couldn't actually walk out of the house without spending $20, which now, like I would say, is probably $120. That's just like to buy something to eat, to grab it, to stuff it in your mouth. So there's two times you want to live in New York. One is when you have no money, and the other is when you have more money than anyone. So uh, I never experienced B. I always experienced A. So New York felt like it was very alive. I learned a lot. I was also young and trying to figure all things out, and it was scary during that time. New York was a bit of a scary place. It's not like it is now, which is a bit like going to Las Vegas. It's a bit family friendly. I saw like three muggings and was chased by people, and so it was not easy peasy during that time, but you're young and you just adapt, and that's the way it is. So that was an amazing alive time in my life. And then LA was like starting up everything from scratch, because you would use that I'm a New York actor thing in LA, and that had a different kind of vibe, but you had to really lift from the beginning. So that was a real heavy friggin' lift. So that's where I kind of did everything sort of to make money aside from acting. And there were far more people in in LA that wanted to become actors, because anyone who was cute that worked in a drugstore in Toledo, somebody went, "Oh, you're really cute. You should go to LA and be an actor." It's like, yeah, okay. So I used to say you can't swing a cat without hitting 10 like amazing looking people. And in New York, there's beautiful people for sure, but like you can't really just get on a Broadway show or a play because you're cute, right? Doesn't work that way. But LA, for a few, gifted few, that does work. And they're like sparklers. I don't know. You know what a sparkler, right? You light the end and it just sprinkles really fast and then it disappears quickly. So, it can happen for some. Um, so the biggest group of actors were from around like, I don't know, 20 years old to 26 years old. And, it'd start to be an attrition rate after that. So it was really hard. It's very, very hard for young actors in LA. And I don't know how they do it. But LA was amazing as well. It also felt very alive, not nearly as alive as New York did, because you had to schlep to everywhere. You had to drive, right? Nothing was like New York, you walked everywhere, grabbed a subway or whatever, and you were boom, boom there. There's no boom booming anywhere in LA. Everything is everything's a schlep. Everything takes a long time to get to. So people are all in their cars and, kind of doing it. It's all sprawled out. And when I first got there, in my apartment building, there was a pool, a swimming pool. And I was like, oh my God, it's a nice day. So I would, go in the pool. And then I kind of felt like 10 years went by and I had just every day is a nice day. So you dive in the pool, you feel like, well, I just did one lap and I got out the other side and I'm 10 years older. Because it's kind of everything is a bit more similar, whereas as I mentioned in New York, everything's alive and every single day. But you know, you can do amazing things in LA. And then I was very lucky to get that, you know, job in Vancouver. And then I felt like, oh my gosh, so now I kind of started to let go of my um, any stage career. That had started to slowly dissipate, and pretty much my last main working years in LA, I never did any stage stuff. It was all film and TV, and then Vancouver was really about film and TV and voice, and it was more about I was, you know, got there, I guess, in my 30s, mid to maybe as old as you were, and so are right now, as you discussed. And so that's a different period in life too. You're still very hungry and but it felt more holistic in a way. It didn't feel so isolated, and it's where, you know, I felt relationships can build there, and it was a great place to spend 18 years, and it was a bit like LA Light, you know. In terms, there was a lot of work that went on there, but it didn't have quite the grind that LA did. And now I don't want you to think that it's easy there because it's not. But I would say it is definitely easier than uh, exclusively LA career. That is that is for certain. So, you know, I was good. I toggled between the both, but I would say I very much enjoyed my time in Vancouver. And now I very much enjoy my time here, you know. And I will say this is my story about any city you're in, because people think, you know, Hawaii is magical, and it is. But um, wherever you live, there are two sides to every stick, and that is the side you adore and the side not so much. And when you're living in a place, both of those coexist, whether you're in New York, whether you're in LA, whether you're in Vancouver, or whether you're, you know, out on an island somewhere. And if you're lucky enough, you can find the beauty in every place. And and I feel very lucky from where I sit right now.
One last thing I want to talk about before I wrap this, before I let you go, is Evac on Transformers, because I'm a huge Transformers fan. And I'm kind of
Yes,
wondering, how did that whole thing come about? And just like
a
because there's
30
just like
second answer.
because just like there's barely anything about this character online, so I'm just kind of wondering, how did
For
that whole thing come
right,
about?
so that was the Wayback Machine. So I think that was maybe right after Gundam or right before. Maybe you probably know the etymology of it. Well, I think Gundam said it was 1972. I mean, I was that, but that's because it was a dub from then. So I don't. So it was either my second. I think it was my second job because I remember the first one more, because and that was Gundam, right? So the second one was like, oh, I kind of got this. So it also was the dubbing gig, right? And you know, it was originally I don't know, was it Korean, I guess,
It was
but
Japanese anime.
Japanese anime. Okay, so you know, uh, we and the good thing about kind of those metal clanking transformer things is the lips didn't really move the same back then. They were more like down, yeah, you know. So you could didn't really have to match lips so much, you know, and so that was easier for sure. But they brought me in because I guess, okay, yeah, they were like, oh, there's this kind of supplemental character, Evac. And so you know, it was not nearly as sexy as the other characters. I mean, I transformed into an ambulance It wasn't like I was a fighter. I was an ambulance. So like,
He
okay,
wasn't an ambulance. He was a
what was he?
helicopter. He was
A
a helicopter.
helicopter. Well, a few times I would look. They didn't I have like a plus sign on, like a Red Cross sign on
I
me?
mean, he was a rescue. Well, I mean, he was the guy who was in charge of rescuing everybody. So I would, yeah. I mean, a rescue
Yeah.
helicopter. Okay.
Okay, I like that better. They're good. Okay, that makes me feel like I'm part of the crew. So, but who was it that directed that? It was Michael, was it,
I think it was
uh,
Terry. Was it Terry?
was it Terry?
I think, if I'm
I
not
can't,
mistaken, it was
might
him.
have Michael. And well, I remember they kept saying, do it more like, so, so I remember I was just kind of maybe doing David Kay, who I think wound up doing it in like the movie, didn't he? So it was me doing David Kay, which is, it's like, I don't sound like David Kay. David Kay's got this amazing, like, "Mwah, David, and so I was trying to do him. So, yeah, I didn't do a lot of those kind of big war things. I find doing a lot of video games. I kind of don't really do them because they wreck my throat. And there's a lot of just like horrible yelling. And I think the best thing about what I do, or maybe it's just what I like to do the best. This is outside of the animation stuff. Is I like believability with some nuance, right? So and when you're screaming at something, you wreck your throat. And I saw that with a lot of guys who, sadly did. In animation can be that rude. The nuance starts to get erased because you're at 10 at everything. I'd rather just kind of bop along at around a 4 or 5 at things. I always feel like this is for like narration or commercials. I always feel like they're most successful when most of the heavy lifting is not done by the voice. Most of the heavy lifting is done by the moving pictures, and that the job of the voice actor is to be almost your own voice in your own head, like you're kind of thinking this as you're watching it, not me as the narrator or the voice guy, but you as watching it, because I sort of think I'm you watching the thing, even if it's a commercial. So that's always been my thing. So, in short, to end all that, is I marvel at guys who can do that stuff, the kind of heavy screaming and the big, broad characters, because that takes so much energy. And I think it takes less energy when you're not just manufacturing a voice, but when you've got the character behind you, you know? That sort of it's a weird kind of thing like channeling something, right? You kind of get the energy from this other thing that you're creating. So that's how it would work for me, how I'd get through the main things. Do you remember Brain Freezer? I'll just add on that.
Yeah,
Brain Freezer!
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my
I mean,
God.
because I was also about to ask, like, brain freezer, because, like, again, anyone who's listening to you talk right now is like, it doesn't sound like brain freezer at all.
No, 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 no. And that was the most. So I had, every once in a while they'd give me a line for a wacky thing, but I think I was doing Jerry Lewis. Wanted, do you know who Jerry Lewis is? There's our old Jerry
I mean,
Lewis
come on,
movies.
Jerry. Who doesn't know who Jerry Lewis is? Come on, man.
I
I'm
don't
not.
know.
I'm not that old. Come on.
I get accused of dad jokes now, so I just, I don't assume anything. Um, so no offense to everybody who knew uh, Jerry Lewis. To those who don't, Google is your friend. So I think I was doing Jerry Lewis one day, and because I was like, okay, but they showed me the picture of the thing. We had to audition, and I was like, oh, and Terry said, yeah, you're going to audition for it. And I was like, oh, I know, I'm not going to get this pulled back hair thing, this guy. So I sort of, kind of made him.
I was like, okay, she's got braces, I guess. Okay, kind of hard to. And then I don't know. I said I sound like Jerry Lewis, so I kind of did it all like that.
And the real kind of thing became kind of the trademark laugh. The and I always have to do this thing with my hands, like I'm twisting up. I go up like a funnel, like I'm twisting this funnel, because literally I think my throat tightens. So, brain freezer kind of made other people in the cast laugh because I had to so contort myself to do it. And they know, I normally sound like this. So just to kind of watch me do that kind of goofy thing. And they also all knew that I'm just not the guy to snap into a nutty character. So there was a lot of delight in that. And so maybe it was born out, and then the Joker in me used to enjoy watching them laugh so I could do it more. But the long extended uh uh brain freezer parts scenes were brutal for me because to get my voice up there for a sustained point period of time, and also like I mentioned, the most important thing is character, is being connected in the scene, because I'm not just doing a weird line. There's a reason why that line comes next, and there's a reason what the perspective of that line is. And without that intention, it is just a stupid voice. And I have no interest in that, and I'm not very good at that. So, brain freezer. It will go down on my, death stone, I guess. Picture of me with brain freezer. He survived brain freezer.
I also want to mention like there's some misinformation regarding Brain Freezer because it says like he was voiced by another actor, in the first four seasons, and you took over in season five.
Really?
Is that true, or is that total
No, I
nonsense?
was always brain freezer. That is where does it say that on IMDb?
It's on Wikipedia. It says like he was voiced by the original guy who did Dookie, and I'm like, no, that's not right.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not accurate. No. By Lewis. No, it wasn't Lewis. Nope. Nope, that was me. I can't claim a lot, but I can definitely claim that.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up because that really
Yes,
bugged me.
you're
That
well.
really bugged me. It's like, oh, it's like, it's not right. I know that's not right.
Yeah. Yeah, weird. Okay. Funny that exists. No, I have uh yep. No, go listen to early ones. You'll hear it's all consistent and it's all me and my choked throat.
Especially when he says brain
Brain
freezer.
freezer. It's a brain freezer.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, and Scott Fellows is amazing. The key to doing a good show with Scott Fellows is to make him laugh. And if you can make him laugh, because you can hear it, because he'll leave the mic open. If you hear him laugh, it's gold. And also, if he gives you a line reading, it's not kind of, sort of. Do it exactly like him, and it's guaranteed to be funny. So, you got to make it sound like it comes from you or whatever. But yeah, so brain freezer kind of would make him laugh, and the laugh would make Scott Fellows laugh. And but you had to put, it was a lot of energy. Like now I'm just going into this close little microphone, but I was, it's harder when you're a little distance from the mic and all of that. Yeah. But anyway, it's me, brain freezer.
All right, thank you so much for taking the time off to have this wonderful conversation. And if you ever want to come back, you know where to find me.
Well, awesome. Thank you for digging into the bowels of the internet and find me. It was lovely to chat.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.